Futures now, old man.
What it do, Future First crew? This is Future First Podcast, where we are helping you win today with the Future First mindset. I'm your co-host J Mac here with my co-host Jose. What up, dude?
What's up, J Mac? How you been?
Good, man. I'm in another startup.
Nice. Yeah, it's the season, right? Yeah.
Tis the season. I was thinking about it, man. Like, I feel like I want to get an episode out here where it's just kind of like a startup 101, or at least, for this year, getting some important information out there about how to tackle a startup and stuff. So I haven't really talked to you about this yet. I'm just kind of throwing it out at you, but I think that'd be a cool thing to do there. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, man, it definitely, gotta fill content, kind of have a lull here where a lot of people are gonna be jumping into some startups. So I think it's a great piece of content we get out to everybody.
Yeah, I think so. If you guys want to hear it, drop a comment down below. Let us know if that's something you're interested in. Other than that, we are still doing our roster review services. So if you are looking for a Dynasty roster review, we'll give you some construction feedback on your roster, give you some general moves or specific moves even to improve your team. We're asking $5 a team to get that set up. You can email us at futurefirstpod@gmail.com if you're interested, and we'll send you some more information. Make sure, if you're watching this on YouTube, to touch down on that like button and go for 2 on the subscribe. Drop a comment while you're there. And if you're catching this on the Player Profiler Network, head over to our YouTube channel directly, Future First Pod. Or if you're listening to this on the podcast versions, search Future First Podcast wherever you're getting your podcast, even if you're on Player Profiler, and head over to ours and make sure you're dropping a follow. You'll get our episodes a little bit sooner, and you'll do us a big favor in return by getting our content liked and reviewed over there. Shout out to Fox, who's been helping us with our graphics. You can follow her on X at bfoxworth07. And shout out to McGrumble, who's been helping us with producing and our stats. You can follow him on X at ff_McGrumble. All right, man. Tonight, we got a 2-round rookie mock draft teed up here. Are you excited about this one?
Yeah, man, our first ever mock draft, 35 episodes in. We kind of started kind of in the middle of last season, so we didn't get to do any mock drafting
It's
for,
true.
some redraft. But, we're talking about a dynasty startup, maybe a little, we can cover that draft type of stuff. But yeah, first rookie mock draft, wanted to only cover, 24 players as we, we're still going through and analyzing all the players. I don't think it makes sense to talk about 36 players if we're not, that knowledgeable on the guys in the third round and such. So yeah, it should be a lot of fun, man. We had some, it got spicy pretty quick in there, which is always fun. You've been playing Dynasty for a while. You know that rookie drafts, you might prepare for 3-4 months, then the rookie draft finally happens, and it's nothing like you thought after 2 or 3 picks. People get wild, and it's a fun time. So, that happened in ours. And can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, man, we got like midway through this second round, and I was pretty excited we were only doing 2 rounds because it dried up real quick, man. You were talking about, getting the third round in there, and let's be honest, no one's looking forward to that third round.
Yeah, that's very true.
All right, but first, as always, a quick hit. You ready, dude?
Let's do it.
All right, tonight's quick hit, we want to talk about what is on everyone's mind. Jaylen Waddle getting moved to the Broncos for for quite the capital, man. A first, a third, and a fourth, right? In exchange for Jaylen Waddle and a fifth. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I believe that was the trade. Yep.
Yeah, man. So give me your thoughts here. What was your immediate reaction when you heard this?
My immediate reaction was I think I felt better about it than him staying in Miami, just because it doesn't seem like they're going to be a great team. And then, slowly kind of sink in Sean Payton, his offense, how that's run, Courtland Sutton. I think Waddle, in terms of where he is at in his career right now, I think he's a better receiver than Courtland Sutton. If he can stay healthy, obviously that's always a big if with Jaylen Waddle, but that's kind of how I felt. That it wasn't um, devastating news. It wasn't super exciting news. It was maybe a little bit lateral slash arrow pointing slightly up. Nothing, nothing crazy. At least I'm not, like I said, I'm not extremely upset with my Waddle shares. I'm not overly, jumping for joy either. What about you?
Yeah, man, my initial reaction was just really down for that move in general. It was bad for pretty much all parties involved. Malik Willis gets into town in Miami thinking that he's got at least a wide receiver to throw to, and then they trade him away, and he's left with Malik Washington. Uh, yeah, I mean Tutu Atwell, I think, is the wide receiver too. Beyond that, I think the guy that has been making, he's on every single free agency trending list, but always available. Theo Weiss. I'm kind of disgusted I didn't even know that name.
I gotta be honest, I had not heard it, so you're ahead of me on that one.
But yeah, when I heard it, I was like, I have been very vocal about how I want nothing to do with the Broncos wide receiver core. I've bought into it one too many times, and only to be shamed over and over again for doing so. And when Waddle goes there, I just feel like, okay, like it's probably a little bit better for him. He's working with a better quarterback. It's a better offense, but I just don't, I'm not confident he's going to get the target share to make him a super relevant fantasy player. I still think he's probably like a wide receiver too in this offense, which is great. That's pretty much what he was before, coming over from the Dolphins. So it doesn't change his outlook, I guess, a little bit. I feel like maybe he has the potential for a higher ceiling. It's probably arguable though. Like I think there was a ceiling argument for him in Miami just based on the volume alone, him being like the only target around. That was my initial reaction. But I don't know, man. The more I like dig into it and I'm kind of looking at things like I'm buying in, man. I don't know. I'm hopeful and I hate it. I need to fight this urge with every, fiber in my body to do it. So has your initial view changed as time has passed?
No, I think it stayed the same. I think like after the initial shock and like the excitement of a big trade like that, because I mean they spent a lot of capital. So I mean they
Yeah.
clearly Sean Payton and the Broncos clearly think a lot about Jaylen Waddle. Obviously they wouldn't be making it, and you're tied to a pretty good offense with a pretty good quarterback that's hopefully just getting better in the NFL. So I think it's the chances for it to ascend into being part of a better team and just in general being in a better situation is the positive. Everything else is like, what is Sean Payne's offense? We know what that's like. Courtland Sutton is a dude that's getting also a lot of money paid his way. So he's going to get the ball. But in terms of that, I mean, I don't, Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, like none of those guys. I mean, they had maybe some fringe dynasty value. Now that Waddle's there, I really don't think it they're very
Yeah.
much in the play at all. I think the other side of the coin to talk about is you brought it up, Malik Willis. I mean, the poor guy just can't really get by a actual shot at starting. Now he gets a chance to start for a team, and they're pretty much in tank mode, which is what is that going to do for his ability to be a starter into the future? And then there's what's his name? I get all the Washingtons confused. Is it Parker Washington, the one that's left in Miami now?
No,
No,
he's in the Jags.
but
Um,
there's wasn't
Taj
there
Washington, is that his name?
maybe I can't remember. I mean, you got Jalen Tolbert. Like, yeah, I mean, somebody's gonna have to benefit. Maybe the beneficiary is just
Choose your
Devon.
fighter.
Yeah, maybe the beneficiary is just De'Von Achane if he doesn't get traded as well, which I think was some rumblings there. about potentially him getting traded. I know the Dolphins came out and kind of put the lid on that, but who knows if they're truly tanking. Holding on to a running back doesn't make a ton of sense, but I guess bad organizations do weird things, right? Like the Jets are tagging Brees and holding him through a rebuild. So, I don't know. Are you interested in anybody there, like at all, or any besides HN, like even in like best ball or like fringe like um cases, or are you pretty much just like nobody's that interesting in Miami?
I'm interested in whatever wide receiver they draft in the first round. I mean, right?
Yeah,
It's got to come down to that, right? Is they're spending the 14th overall pick? Is that what it is? It's something like that. But they also now have the 28th overall pick. So I mean, they have two first round picks, and I expect one of them to be spent on a wide receiver, and is probably going to be one of the big three. Would be my guess. But I'm also kind of interested in Greg Dulcich. Like he flashed a little bit, towards the end of last season. I'm not trying to go out and acquire him for, crazy capital, but if I could get him thrown on in a trade,
yeah.
oh, I
I mean,
guess
he,
it's
he's
interesting
he's
to
been
me.
more injured than Waddle of all people. Like that guy hasn't. I don't think he's played more than 10 games his entire career. So yeah, I mean, he's somewhat interesting. And the guy I was thinking was Malik Washington. I mean, I think
Malik.
he's more interesting than Jalen Tolbert or Terrence Marshall. They have another Washington who you were talking about, which was like Taj. I mean, Tutu Outwell's there. So I mean, Malik Washington. I guess he's probably the two after the guy they draft, like you're saying, probably at 14. But it's just like, man, through a rebuild, none
Hmm.
of these guys project to be like, the cream of the crop wide receiver talent, at least right now. And it's just like, is that what you want to invest in going forward? I don't know. It seems a little bit weird, but we'll see exactly who lands there. Overall,
Yeah.
I kind of just feel bad for Malik Willis and kind of what his chances are to try to demonstrate what kind of quarterback he is.
Yeah, and honestly, like I mean, it's kind of in terms of fantasy, I feel like it's also pretty good news for Malik Willis in general too, because he's got some rushing upside. So with no one to throw to as of right now, maybe that just means more rushing yards for him. So if you
Yeah.
have a Malik Willis and you're hoping that he can provide some QB2 numbers for you, that might just be a plausible out here with Waddle on the move. But I do want to go back to the Broncos side of this a little bit because speaking to why I'm kind of starting to buy into it, like you said, just the capital that they put into Jaylen Waddle, just makes me feel like that they want to make him a significant part of this offense. And it's really like a dagger into Troy Franklin. Like he flashed last year, but it couldn't sustain that usage or efficiency, through the whole season. And I think they brought in Jaylen Waddle to be what they wanted Troy Franklin to be. So if we kind of translate that usage to what Troy Franklin was or the role that he was playing, and you put Waddle's efficiency numbers into that, I'm kind of interested in that. And I'm going to shout him out here. He is lovingly known as Jay in the Discord server that we're in, which is the OTC Discord server. It's a great Discord server. If you guys are looking for one to join, you can head over there and look up that. But this guy, man, he's done some great work. He has this database where he can compare players, and it's got to have some sort of AI component to it. And I wish I could link you guys to it, but I didn't have his permission yet. And if he does give me permission later in the day, I'll try to link you guys to it in the comments on the YouTube video. But I'm going to present the information here on what he did. And he kind of goes through all the primary routes between Sutton and Waddle and looks at who has, the better success per the routes. And then he also breaks it down in terms of expected points added. So the EPA, which is a very highly correlative stat to fantasy success is a good way to put it. And he kind of also matched it up into, what Nix's strong points are, and who complements Nick's better, whether it's Waddle or Sutton. And Waddle comes out far and ahead here. The summary is Waddle is overall more efficient with 0.4 EPA versus Sutton's 0.26 with better success rates. Sutton is heavily reliant on go routes, 18% of his routes, which are high volume but have a variable efficiency. Waddle excels at high efficiency routes, which are, the post, the in, the dig, the deep route. All of those are at 0.6 EPA or higher. Sutton converts deep balls well, 12 touchdowns on the goes, but struggles in short routes like slants. So Waddle's diverse route tree and route specific success make him a more reliable weapon despite the lower TD numbers. So I think we can kind of just expect Waddle to be the more possession receiver in this offense. So if we're looking in like a PPR perspective, which is kind of like what we saw from Troy Franklin last year. But Troy Franklin also had some explosive plays in there. So I kind of expect Waddle to step into that role and just play it to a higher efficiency. And that it's getting me more excited. And I'm kind of buying into it, but cautiously optimistic here as I've been let down over many years with Sean Payton.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think he's the clear one there. I mean, Sutton's still going to take part, but I think it only just helps that they will play across from each other, kind of keep the defense and keep it more open. Like you said, I mean, Troy Franklin had like 100 targets last year. I think if you put that plus some on Waddle's plate, he's easily up there in like 1,000 yards, and it's just going to be how many touchdowns is he able to get? I mean, now you're projecting him to be on a much more explosive offense and winning / having to score a lot more, right? They're playing a first place schedule. So, I think for Denver, it's all good things. It's all positive for Waddle. Can he stay healthy? Hopefully he does. And,
Good point.
then it could be a key kind of career turnaround for him, right? Like I don't think a lot of people were excited about Waddle, but maybe he can have a good showing here and win another contract or an extension, and then be more dynasty relevant for a few more years.
Yeah, great news for Bo Nix, by the way, too, right? I mean, if I think that's
Yeah.
a big takeaway there. All right, I can't wait to see the Waddle in an orange jersey, literally waddling around. So that'll be interesting. All right, man. Let's hear some words from the Podfather before we get into our mock draft here. Podfather is gonna touch in on the Dynasty Deluxe, and we'll be back with you in one moment.
If you play in Dynasty, you need Dynasty Deluxe, our premium package for Dynasty Leaguers. We rank over 300 players, updated every week, all year long. And there's a win now mode and a rebuild mode with Superflex and tight end premium controls. And a Dynasty League sync where you can say, sync down all of my sleeper teams, all my FFPC teams, and then you can browse around your leagues for who has needs, and then you can use our trade finder to see what kinds of trades are happening in leagues that are similar to the one I want to do. Then you can analyze trades using our trade analyzer, which balances the lifetime value, which includes pick values out to like 2028. All of that plus the rookie guide, $25 value is included. So if you're just in one Dynasty League, Dynasty Deluxe is well worth it. And use your host's promo code, and you can bump up to all in and get $25 off.
All right, welcome back. We're here in our rookie mock draft segment, and let's just jump right into the presentation mode here. So on the screen here, you're going to see half of the first and half of the second round here, and we'll try not to spoil it for you podcast listeners, but for you watching on YouTube, you guys can see it as we go. Shout out to the Toe Clan who helped us do this mock draft. Thank you all for participating. We love you guys. And let's just jump right into it, man. We had no legs, Lieutenant Dan leading us off here at the 1-1. No surprise. Jeremiah Love going off the board. I don't know how much we need to say. about Jeremiah Love at the 1-1, but I guess there is a little bit of shakeup. We were talking about it the other day offline about how the landing spots for Jeremiah Love have sort of dried up with a lot of the free agency signings, and it's looking like there's maybe only 3 or 4 suitors that make sense, and some of them aren't as exciting as we want them to be. So I guess where are you still at with Jeremiah Love? He's clearly still the 101 for you, I imagine, but how is your enthusiasm as we have progressed through March here?
Yeah, I mean it's you went from him kind of being mocked to the Chiefs a lot, pretty consistently, right? They're in like the top 10, which would be awesome. I mean, pretty much wherever Jeremiah Love goes, seen a few mock drafts, NFL mock drafts, where he slides a bit going into the teens, which would be a little bit depressing. Just just for the talent, you're not going to get that Bijan, Genti, Zeke, Saquon sort of thing. But either way, I mean, something catastrophic would have to happen, like Shador Sanders level, for him to not be the 101, just because he is clearly the best player for fantasy football coming out of college. So, but it could be interesting. I mean, it could get a little ugly if you were, if you're not a contender, a contender that ended up with the 101 somehow, or you traded for it because you want a running back. I know we've been doing roster reviews and been kind of talking about that a decent amount. Trading for the 101 if you need a running back. But, if he slides to like the Ravens, I've seen now being mocked there. That's kind of stinky for the first year, at least while Derrick Henry's there. But yeah, like you're talking about, really in the top 10 now, it's pretty much just Washington, Tennessee, and Arizona. But I don't think Arizona makes any sense with how many holes they have. Tennessee, I mean, that's kind of the new favorite spot for them to, for people to mock him to. But I don't know, man. They need a lot over like a running back. So it'd be interesting to see if he really went, that way. Dable was okay letting go of Saquon. So how much does he really value and love an elite running back? Is that his big thing? Like, does he think he can find the Cam Scatterboo maybe later? I don't know. But otherwise, it's like in the top 10, there's not another really good landing spot. The Commanders, maybe, that would be maybe the only other spot, but they have a lot of needs elsewhere as well. They don't have a wide receiver basically besides Terry McLaurin. They did send a lot of free agents in for defense. So I don't know. It's not much to talk about in terms of him. It's just in terms of like what production profile are you going to get out of him in year one, depending where he goes. So, that's pretty interesting scenario there of like where could he end up on. But besides that, we're moving right along. I don't know if you want to hit the next pick we got in.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think the Commanders is pretty much the nuts spot now where we want him to go. Outside of that, it's like the Giant. I don't know. I'd be okay with the Titans. I feel like if he went to the Giants, that would just be like a fantasy headache. I feel like, which is probably where he's gonna end up going.
I mean, I feel like if he does, and that just means that the new coach Harbaugh is not a big fan of Cam Scatterboo, especially going on podcasts and saying that CTE is fake or whatever nonsense he was doing the other day. But I think it just means it would be I think the end of Cam Scatterboo. Like, I mean, there's no way in any world, shape, or form where they would take him in a top 5 scenario. And then
I don't think they do.
Like, no, I don't think so. But in the case they do, I think it just means Cam Scatterboo is
absolutely
dead.
For sure.
Otherwise, like, I still wouldn't have much problem with Jeremiah Love going there. But yeah, I mean, like you said, the Commanders, a different NFC East team, would be now, I think, the premier landing spot for him. And then I was next. I had the 102. I went Mekhi Lemon. If you guys have been listening to Rookie HQ or even here, he's still my number one receiver. That hasn't changed for me. Obviously, draft capital and where he lands could change that. As I've said, him and Tate, I think, are pretty much plug and play in either one of these spots. If you have one of these picks, the only thing that you're hoping at 103, for example, is that Mendoza goes 102, and then you get to make the pick. Otherwise, I think if you're at 102, 103, you have that decision made for you, unless you're a big Jordan Tyson fan, and then maybe you want to pick that one over whichever gets left between Tate and Lemon. I think that is where, to talk about that a little bit, it is important to, you're hearing us talk about that, like that's the standard. And I think you're going to see a lot of mock drafts where at least these first 3 picks are like this. Maybe Mendoza goes 102, in which case the first 4 picks are going to be these players that we've talked about. But you should do your own research and really plug into people that are talking about these players and find out what type of player do you like, right? Just because this is consensus and maybe you have the 103 and Tate falls to you, but maybe you don't like Tate as a prospect, right? He is supposed to be the second best wide receiver, or maybe the first, and you get Mekhi Lemon. Do your due diligence. So if you get stuck with a player, you can look to trade out of it, right? You can be prepared for that scenario of like, hey, I really don't like Mekhi Lemon. I understand he's supposed to be the 103. Let me, go trade out of it, right? Don't just pick a player because he's supposed to be the pick if you don't like him, or, if he's not the type of player that, fits your team need or fits what, you like the draft. I think is one of the things that I've kind of started to realize more about myself too, that I need to do is like, you don't need to make the pick, and trading back, I think, is a lot easier when the draft is going, right? So, so I'd put Mekhi Lemon. I'm not sure if you wanted to touch on him, or, what did you think? Would you probably would have gone Tate here if you had the 102?
Yeah, I probably would have. It's hard to know. Like at this point in time, I would take Tate just because I have him, I think above Lemon at this point. Landing spot and draft capital will dictate a lot there. Although I think Tate will get the better draft capital. I think that's just how I imagine it playing out. So landing spot is probably going to be the really deciding point between these two. And I mean, Tate went 103 next. Fox took him there pretty quickly too. So I don't think there's much to say about that. It's just like you were saying, like 1-2, and then you would typically see either Tyson or Mendoza go next. But I think our good buddy Spoonman was kidnapped here by Denzel Boston's parents and coerced into drafting Denzel Boston at the 104. Spoonman, if you're out there and you're in trouble, send us a message. We'll send help for you. But other than that, we moved right along to Jordan Tyson, who was selected at the 105. The Paul Rudd touch, that is McGrumble himself. He noted he expected the choice between Jordan Tyson and Fernando Mendoza to be a decision he would need to make at the 102, not at the 105 itself. So he felt like he had a steal there at the 105. Is there anything you want to say about, Denzel Boston or Jordan Tyson before we move on here to the next pick, man?
Yeah, not necessarily like the players themselves. I mean, if you're plugged into the Rookie HQ, where we've been dropping episodes there on Mondays as well, we've been talking about, we're going to go through and talk about all the wide receivers. We did KCC the other day. We'll get to Mekhi Lemon, Denzel. We'll do episodes on each one of these guys. If you want to hear like exactly in depth about a specific player, but I think this does speak to things that can happen in your rookie drafts, right? Like everybody mocks, everybody thinks like, oh, going into it, this is what's going to happen. I mean, this is what I was alluding to earlier in the episode, and it's just like you have to be ready to stay water. Like if Mekhi Lemon, if Jordan Tyson does fall to like the 105.6, right, like somewhere where he's not expected, can somebody, instead of you snap making that pick, right, because you're like, oh, sick, I got Tyson, I thought I was gonna have to pick Mendoza or something, right? Can you sit on that for a little bit and kind of reap extra value and maximize the edges by taking advantage of a chaotic draft, right? One person in your draft does something crazy, or what's perceived crazy by the community, and drafts Denzel Boston at the 104. Now the entire draft's up in chaos, right? Like what the heck's going on? This dude just reached, everybody's flaming him, blah blah blah, it's funny or whatever. But is there a way that you can maximize if you're the next pick up? Right now, all of a sudden a player that nobody thought would be there is there. So I think that's one of the things, like, when we do mock drafts, and I think this is why it's fun to do it with real life people, because you get these sorts of things that, the computer will just go, pretty standard, pretty in order. So, but otherwise, no, I mean, I think, it is a curveball. It does then give you situations where now you have to make a decision between players you weren't thinking. So, you got to be ready. You got to be on your feet, and you got to be really paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah, agreed. And I would just, finish that up with, probably don't spend your 104 on Denzel Boston there. There's, a number of players we would probably recommend over that player there. But we're going to move on here to the 106, which was yours truly. And I noted that I would have tried to trade out of this pick, the 106, until Fernando Mendoza fell to me. And I smashed that button so hard and was happy to do so. Yeah, Fernando Mendoza, I don't think there's much to say there. I think he's pretty plug and play here for the NFL, going to the Raiders. He'll step into a starting job in a Superflex league. You just push that button and hope for the best. Hopefully that he lands in the lottery there to get you a really high value pick here. Then we had Mando, picking Kenyon Sadiq at the 1.7, knowing that this was a half-point premium tight end league. Pretty standard, I think, all the way up until then, outside of the Denzel Boston pick. So going forward here, Raheem chose to go KC Concepcion as the next pick there, which I think is, after you get past Sadiq, which would typically be the 1-6, then you have, a real choice to make between those next three wide receivers, which would typically be Denzel Boston, KC Concepcion, and Omar Cooper Jr. Raheem, who's a very smart dynasty mind and very plugged in, chose to go with KC Concepcion, which I think, Jose, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, without the tier breaker of draft capital and where some of these guys went, because I mean, we like KC Concepcion, but the NFL might not. He might fall to the second round. How much does he fall? Those sorts of things. I mean, one thing for me is, if I'm in your spot, I am still looking to trade out. I don't, as we've talked about in our Superflex episode, like, just because it's Superflex league, like Mendoza to me doesn't project to be like that type of player that you're going to be super happy with, unless it's like the high end. And I get, throwing that dice and hoping that that's what happens. But, I think there'll be a lot of people that'll be in your situation, and teams that are desperate for quarterbacks. Every league has multiple teams in Superflex that are needing quarterbacks that will come up and spend up. And I think I could just leverage that, especially if he's falling to a spot like 106 and not going on earlier in the draft. But yeah, other than that, Sadiq makes a lot of sense there. And then, yeah, from there, it kind of turns into, who do you like? What do you prefer, right? I think you could see things like Cooper at the 106. You could see Denzel Boston at the 106. You could see Ty Simpson. You could see maybe one of these other running backs that are going to go later here if they get the draft capital, right? Like if Coleman has a, early day 2 capital, could he sneak into this, be way more in consideration? Or,
Jadarian Price goes end of the second to the Seahawks.
Yep, exactly. Any of these guys has a, really good draft capital. They could definitely vault themselves. I think that's where the volatility is, and what you've been talking about all offseason, that you hope, it's not a bleak mock draft or a bleak NFL draft like the mock draft we were talking about off air, where it was only like 7, I think, offensive players in the first round, which would be pretty bad for fantasy football considerations. You hope to see maybe like 8 to 10, something more significant number. So for the people that are holding 108s to the 112s, for your value of a player you're getting,
for sure,
to go up.
Yeah, and if you do want to hear more about that mock draft episode, we're going to break that down over on the Rookie HQ channel on the rookie market values. So go check out that show if you want to hear more about that specific mock draft. But let's move on here. We have Willie 3 Sticks choosing Ty Simpson at the 1-9 with the note of, I'm expecting Ty to get first round capital. I think in a Superflex, it's got to be Ty pick at number 9 if that happens. So there is that little caveat there where he expects Ty Simpson to go. I imagine if we're thinking the end of the first round, it's got to be something like the Rams, although they traded out of their first round pick, right? I mean, they got that cornerback. So who's he really going to, I guess, at that point? I mean, we know now that Minnesota has their quarterback. I don't really, maybe Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh at 16, I think it is. Maybe they take Ty Simpson.
16 is a team that I think the Jets
The
could take
Jets.
him. But yeah, I mean, I think Pittsburgh's earlier than that. I don't remember where they're at, but yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
Pittsburgh's on the 21. Sorry.
21. Okay. Yeah, not much more to put into that pick other than Willie Three Sticks saying quarterbacks and Superflex are valuable. I expect one to go in the first round. I'm going to take him here. All
Yeah.
right. Next up, we got Wookie, known as, or on Sleeper as Hawks for Life, taking Jonah Coleman at the 110. No note given there. I think he just likes the talent, as do we. I think, Jonah Coleman is probably one of my favorite running backs outside of Jeremiah Love in this draft class. Are you okay with taking Jonah Coleman at the 110 if he lands well?
Yeah, I mean, he like we were talking about, he might be somebody that catapults a few spots earlier, or is definitely in the mix at these picks right now without the landing spot. If something catastrophic happens and he's in like the fifth round, then he completely falls, I think, down into second, third, something like that, just based on the draft capital. But I think it would make a lot of sense to see him come the rookie draft season in that spot if he lands in the second, third round
Oh, yeah.
of the NFL draft.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I'm now realizing that I am cutting off part of this, but as I fix that, we'll look at the 111 here made by the Von Dutchman, known as Banana Splits to us in the Toe Clan, taking Omar Cooper Jr. at the 111, with the note saying that he was happy to take either one of the Indiana wide receivers here, meaning Omar Cooper Jr. or Elijah Surratt at the 111. And also, right around this time, news broke of Waddle being traded to the Broncos. So he dropped a note in the chat saying, "Holy balls, Batman, I just drafted the Dolphins wide receiver one." So making the same assumption that we made, thinking that the Dolphins are going to be drafting a wide receiver here in the draft. And Omar Cooper Jr. kind of makes a lot of sense in that sense, but if they choose to, take him with their later round pick rather than their earlier round pick.
Yeah, I
So
was gonna say, yeah, I think they might go for. I think that would make sense. I mean, somebody could fall, or having those two first round picks means it's easier to trade up to maybe the earlier 20s to get a wide receiver if the guy they like is still there. So I don't hate that. I think he's. Would you say he's been one of the since kind of this process started, since we started into rookie fever, that he's the guy that's kind of elevated himself the most out of the non super solidified picks? Like, he seems to have climbed up draft boards the most, at least in rookie terms, like rookie drafts.
I would absolutely say so. I mean, he's been an absolute, rocket when it comes to, getting up there. I think he wasn't even really discussed in the first round of mock drafts for a long time, but he since gained a lot of steam, and I think for good reasons. I really like the guy. He, is comped a lot of times to like a Debo Samuel, just a little, lighter weight, but great run after the catch ability, very tough to tackle. Yeah, in general, just a great football player. I think I feel good about drafting him if he goes to, a pretty solid landing spot.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, you can barely see it here on screen, but realistic Finns fan, the old man of the group, known here as Finns, drafting Skylar Bell at the 112. And I will give you the backstory that he gave us. I'm going to give you the abbreviated version here, more comedic than anything. He said, obviously, he won this league last year, so he has the 112, and you would expect him to have that pick. But no, he actually didn't have that pick. He had to trade into it because he traded his 2026 pick away smartly last year for a stud running back. Let's call it James Cook, people were down on James Cook in the beginning of 2025 season. He sent the first to go get him, buying on low on that dip. And after he won that season, he traded James Cook away for an asset like Kyler Murray, DJ Moore, and the 112 so that he could get into Skylar Bell here at the 112. I was actually a little bit shocked Skylar Bell was this high in ADP. I thought he was going to be a lot lower, going in like the third, but it's pretty standard, I suppose, for him to go here at the end of the first. Are you making that pick on Skylar Bell here?
No, not at all. I mean, I would have taken the running backs we mentioned, probably Surratt ahead of him, probably the other Bell I would have rang sooner, and Chris Bell.
Oh,
I think
nice. I like that.
I mean, you're talking about a guy that's what, about to be 24, if I'm not mistaken, by his profile. Yeah, he's 23.7 now. He's coming from a pretty small school, Connecticut. His production profile is not great. He doesn't have great after the catch ability. So I don't know. He's not a very interesting. But I think that is what some of those later round picks could turn into. But
Right.
I think a guy whose name we haven't even mentioned once is Eli Stowers. I would definitely
Boom.
be all over him in that range way more than any of these. Omar Cooper Jr. is probably the last wide receiver maybe that I'm taking over Stowers. Obviously, without draft capital, coming into equation, but I think in a tight end premium league, you're going to see Stowers kind of like the Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland of last year, where those were kind of the back end of the first, the 110s, 19s, that sort of range. I think that's where Stowers is probably more likely to go if his NFL draft capital is um, anywhere like decent to good.
Absolutely. I think that's the pick that I'm making here. It's between Surratt and Stowers, and I'm probably leaning Stowers given the format here at the 112. In fact, I know specifically there are some draft circles around here who are taking Eli Stowers above Kenyon Sadiq, believe it or not. So you might see that out there in the wild. So be ready, Future First podcaster listeners. You guys are going to be ready to pounce on that Sadiq when it gets there. All right, moving back to the 2-1, we push it back to No Legs Lieutenant Dan, who happily takes the next best player, at least in my eyes, which is Elijah Surratt. Obviously, we were just talking about him as, for me, in contention for the 112 there. But Elijah Surratt here, again, I think a sneaky good wide receiver here. He's, with the Indiana Hoosiers, played with Fernando Mendoza beside Omar Cooper Jr., had a very productive year. And I think he's a solid prospect. He had really good analytical numbers. And I think that he's, for the price that you're paying to get him here, is, given the draft class that we're talking about here, is it feels like a good value.
Yeah, 100%. It's a mock draft, so you can't be too upset. But I was a little bit upset that he didn't fall to me. That's the guy that I was kind of targeting to go for in the second round. So then I had to pivot, and it was kind of like that pack of running backs. It feels like it's Jeremiah Love and then Jonah Coleman, kind of two separate tiers, and then there's the next tier of running backs where you have, the Emmett Johnsons, Jadarian Price, maybe Nicholas Singleton, Mike Washington Jr., maybe like all those kind of running backs feel like, kind of different flavor of ice cream. Who do you think? Who do you like? I'm not a big fan of Jadarian Price really at all. So he wasn't in consideration for me. So I went with the Nebraska Emmett Johnson. It's not super, excited right now, but let's see what the draft capital is. I think things could change for a lot of these running backs, and it could kind of shake up the end of the first, beginning, the second round. Maybe if you have, stockpiled second round picks going into this draft, you might be a little bit happier than you are if you have like the back end of the first. Cause the second round flyers, like if you have two, several second rounders in the beginning / middle, it feels a little bit better taking shots on some of these names than it does like at the end of the first.
Yeah, agreed. I like Emmett Johnson a lot. He has probably the higher upside out of any of these running backs here, just with the pass catching profile he does. I'm gonna take a quick break here. Devon Dutchman posted a pretty great question in the chat here, and he said, "What running back room would get anyone to move up to select Jonah or a below running back?" You know, speaking on Jonah Coleman, saying, you know, essentially, what running back room would feel as though the draft capital would be worth spending over these wide receivers here. So I guess what landing spots are we looking for these running backs to go to where we might, you know, be tempted to swing on them here? And I guess to me, the first ones that come to mind are like the Commanders, like we were saying, the Seahawks. I would even maybe be excited if the Steelers took a running back. You know, they have Jaylen Warren and who's the other guy that they brought in there?
Rico Dowdle.
Rico Dowdle. Yeah, so I mean, maybe challenging those guys. Was there another landing spot that you would be tempted to buy into?
I mean, at some point, if it's not Jeremiah Love at like 4, I think Tennessee could be decently interesting, right? They have Tony Pollard, but he's getting old and he's nothing special. The Ravens could be somewhat
Mm,
interesting as kind of like a spelling Henry and then into the future. But there isn't a ton of running back places that you'd be super excited for. I guess maybe Texans, even though they did trade for Montgomery, but what they traded for him wasn't anything exceptional that you feel like if they drafted somebody, it would be impossible to overcome for a rookie. So it kind of feels like the opposite of last year, where there was felt like a lot of good landing spots for running backs.
yeah,
This year, there's not very many running backs, projected to be drafted very highly, and there's just doesn't seem like a ton of room for
yeah,
them.
that's
You
true.
hope that they don't end up going, to dead zones or to muddy, backfields like a Tampa Bay or something weird like that, like a Dallas Cowboys or something like that. That would feel bad for the wide, the person there, the incumbent, and then like the person coming in. Like so, Arizona, I guess, is also one, right? They didn't do much in terms of free agency. They paid somebody a little bit of money, but nothing spectacular either. So
How about
I
the
think there's
Vikings? The
the
Vikings.
Vikings. Yeah, I mean Jordan Mason's there making a bit of money. They restructured Aaron Jones so he could stick around. So again, it would be um, a pretty decent spot. Maybe not the first year if Jordan Mason is going to hold on to a decent amount of that workload, but going into the future, you'd be somewhat excited, right? KOC is a good offensive coordinator and a good offense if they can figure out quarterback. So yeah, that would be another one.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that felt worthy to kind of call out. Appreciate the question there from the Von D. All right, next up we got Fox at the 203 taking Jadarian Price. Yeah, I mean, I guess this is about the spot where it kind of feels like he's gonna go. It starts to dry up real quick here. After we get Elijah Surratt off the board, there's not much else out there. Eli Stowers was still on the board. I think that's probably one pick that I would probably take over Jadarian Price here. But I could definitely see a lot of hype for Jadarian Price if he gets if he gets the draft capital that people are projecting him to get, and it's in a good landing spot. You know, say like the Seahawks.
Yeah, you just probably much want anybody that goes to Seahawks, right? Like
I
that's
mean,
what I'm
yeah,
hearing
at this
here. Like,
point, right? Yeah,
yeah, I mean, yeah. I honestly, I when I made my pick, I would have taken Stowers if I had
yeah.
realized that he was still on the board. I kind of didn't. I kind of made my pick a little bit hastily, quickly, which can happen to you, if you're kind of on the move and
You
you're
got
doing a
sniped,
slow
man. You
rookie.
you
I
you
got
said it in
sniped,
the
and
chat.
yeah,
You, I
exactly.
mean,
I
you
got
said,
flustered. I didn't pay attention, and yeah, Eli Stowers was there, which would have been a better pick than either of these two running backs, at least in my book. So yeah, and then you had the other Bell, who I was talking about, Chris Bell, who I think I would have above who Finns took at the 112, and
yeah,
then yeah, and then I mean for me, the Paul Rudd, he kind of ended up with the best draft and
for
just players
sure.
falling to him, right? Like just guys that just value, which is pretty exciting if that happens to you in the rookie in mocks or
Yeah,
in
so we had Spoonman take Chris Bell at the 2-4, and then we have the Paul Rudd touch at the 2-5 take Eli Stowers. So just to reiterate, he ended up with Jordan Tyson at the 1-5, and then Eli Stowers at the 2-5. So as Jose was saying, feels like a lot of value fell to him there, and feels like he probably won this draft with only those two players. And next up, you have yours truly, and I decided to make more of a statement pick here. I even said it into the chat that I wanted to take my guy just so that I could kind of talk about him here on the podcast, and that is Eric McAllister at the 206. He's a very talented wide receiver. He's a 4-year wide receiver who produced all 4 of those years, had really great analytical numbers. He most recently played at TCU, where this last year he put up almost 1,100 yards on quite a few catches there. Great yards per route run, great targets per route run, great contested catch rate. The guy is a stud. And he's going to fall in the draft because he has off the field issues. You can, I'm not going to talk about it here on the podcast, but you can look it up if you want. So I think that he'll fall there. But if he ends up going to a spot where there is an established wide receiver 1 and they need, and just a guy to play on the outside, because he kind of profiles more as like an X receiver. He's a very big guy that kind of likes to win in a physical nature, not necessarily grabbing 50-50 balls, but definitely with his hands and beating people off the line, and doing so. So especially bonus point if there's a really accurate quarterback. He's very good at catching the ball on the run. So I wanted to shout him out and have the platform to talk about him. Jose, do you even know who Eric McAllister is?
No, I mean, I had to go looking in like PlayerProfiler ranking. I mean, he's a 20th ranked wide receiver for them. So I mean, don't be a JMac. If you are into McAllister, you could probably get him for 10 fab after the draft's over, depending on how many rounds you have.
Plant that flag.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so no, I wasn't familiar, but looking him up, I mean, Quentin Johnson did a number on a lot of us with the TCU wide receivers. So
He's better.
That
He's
scoring
better
is
than
still
Quentin Johnston.
that scoring is still fresh. But yeah, I mean, those are the type of players, if you're up on them and you can find somebody that you really like, that you can kind of get in later rounds, those and to be excited about. That makes those third and fourth round picks, if you have them, or later second round picks, whatever, more exciting, right? If you can get a guy that you like, right? So if you study up on some of these deeper players, it can make the draft more exciting, and you can end up with more of your guys to sit on your taxi squad for a few years and then you drop.
That is a very good note. You do not need to take Eric McAllister at the 2-6. We only had 2 picks in this draft.
Yeah.
I needed to take him a little higher if I wanted to talk about him. Definitely, he's more of a third or fourth round pick. But keep him on your radar, guys, because he's talented. He's just going to slide in the draft because of off the field issues. All right, the next pick off the board here at the 207, Mando, taking Jeremy Bernard, another talented wide receiver out of Auburn. He was the go-to Alabama. Thank you. Out of Alabama, the go-to guy over there, in stepping up in absence of what Ryan Williams couldn't produce in the 2025 season. He was also teammate to Omar Cooper Jr. in the Washington Huskies when he played over there with Rome. Omar Cooper Jr. outproduced Jeremy Bernard. So I think Jeremy Bernard is a fine profile at this cost here at the 2.7. I don't mind taking the swing there. Do you have any more notes on Jeremy Bernard there, Jose?
No, I mean, I think he had a pretty decent combine. It seems like he tested decently well, ran like a 4.4, I think. So, he's an interesting guy. I mean, you're in the middle of the second round now, in a pretty shallow talent, at least fantasy football relevant talent class. So, take your shots. If you do your homework, this is where you can maybe mine a little bit of extra value, or pick some guys that other people aren't so up on. So, not much else to add there, though.
All right, next up at the 208, Rakeem takes Mike Washington Jr., the combine darling, breaking obviously that speed score, the second highest speed score in all of history, outside of Bo Jackson. So take that for what it is. He's fast and he's heavy, and I hope there's probably going to be some team out there that falls in love with that profile. Hopefully it works out. If it does, it probably hits the ceiling potential is where I would see it going if he does end up working out. But I think that's kind of like a buyer beware situation there with this draft class.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, next up we have Willie Three Sticks taking Zachariah Branch at the 2-9. I don't know too much about Zachariah Branch. I feel like he actually gave us notes on that one. I don't have them pulled up here necessarily, but do you have much to say on Zachariah Branch, Jose?
No, I mean, Willie's a guy that's pretty plugged into college football and studies a lot of rookies, so it doesn't surprise me that he made a pick that we're not super familiar with. But yeah,
Yeah, he seemed mad that he wanted Jeremy Bernard, I think is what it was, because he is an Alabama fan. Is that right?
yes. Yeah. Ty Simpson in the first also.
Shocker. All right. Next up, we have Wookie at the 2-10, selecting Nick Singleton. Great value there. Great pick, Wookie. I love that pick. Nick Singleton is going to fall in your rookie drafts because he's injured with a broken foot, but probably one of the more talented running backs coming out of this class. In fact, I think he would have a lot more hype if he didn't have that broken foot. But that is good news for you because his value is suppressed because of it. If you can get him at the 2-10, that's the pick I'm probably making every single time.
And one of the youngest running backs too. I mean, he's barely 22. He's if it wasn't for Jeremiah Love and a couple other later round guys, he'd probably be one of the youngest guys at 22 coming out from Penn State. So yeah, I mean, he's a decently interesting guy with him being hurt and him falling in drafts because I mean. The NFL will tell you what they think about him even when hurt, right? Because when players are hurt, it doesn't necessarily always matter in the NFL. They reach on those guys and draft them higher anyways. So he'll be pretty interesting to watch come the maybe day 3, right? Or you maybe late day 2, probably not, but who knows?
Yeah, I did hear too that he's gonna try and get a workout in before the draft. I think it's before the draft. And in general, they he's trying to get cleared so that he can do that and do some private workouts so he can kind of show off his stuff to the teams because he hasn't really had the chance to do so. All right, next up here to close out the draft with the last 2 picks, we have the Von Dutchman at the 2-11, selecting Adam Randall. And when he made that pick, I said, Von D, who the is that? And he came back saying he's a senior, Clemson running back, big body back, who ran an okay time of a 4.5 40-yard dash at the combine. He doesn't have the flashy stats or production profile that would drop the jaw, and yet his attributes and skill set being converted wide receiver to a running back, the back that can catch and have goal line opportunities, just needs to have some draft capital and opportunity, being a fantasy football sneaky sleeper. He also said that he made the narrative that Adam Randall goes to Baltimore in the fourth round, and the king needs a prince to take the crown, and Randall fits the mold. He says the king finally shows his age and wears down early. Randall begins to get more looks, stepping into an even more starting role and then taking over. So do your research on Adam Randall. Von D, who plays Devi and I know is plugged into college football, likes this guy, and you probably don't need to take him at the 2-11. I think this was more of a statement pick and a flag plant so that we could probably shed some light onto him into the podcast here. So let's move on to the last pick in the draft, which is made by Realistic Fins fan Fins. Jaylen, I don't even know what his first name here is.
Jacoby
Lane, rounding up the draft here at 2-12. That's about all I have to say on Jay Lane.
Yes, sir. Mr. Jaylen, USC wide receiver. He's a guy. He plays football, so it's not a you could make worse picks, I guess. But pretty interesting there. I mean, at these points in the drafts, it's all dart throws, right? Like you're getting into pretty much. I feel like 4 picks maybe into the second round. It may be earlier than other drafts. You're really feeling like you're throwing some darts here and hoping you come up with the magical Puka Nakua or what have you sort of later round pick.
Yeah, this draft was so entertaining. I forgot to take an ad break in there, so you guys are gonna get. I'm sure you heard that just plugged in there randomly, but sorry for that. But we are at the end of the show here. Let's get into the outro. Thanks for sticking with us. Hopefully you guys liked that mock draft episode. Again, thank you to the Toe Clan and all y'all who participated in this. We couldn't have put this together without you guys. So big shout out to you guys. What do we got on the doc next, man, for the next weeks?
Let's see. I was going to mention that if you guys wanted to, mock with us, we're going to be doing more of these in the future for sure. Go ahead and, drop a comment, let us know. I think we're going to be talking about our favorite rookies and most hated rookies next week. And then right before the draft, we're kind of going to talk about our final thoughts right before the NFL draft takes place. So, still more rookie talk all the way through here.
Nice. Peace.